All right, I think we can get started right on time. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session and spending the next hour with us. Today, we'll cover how to leverage KNIME's data apps to broaden the reach of data science. And I should probably turn my video on. Here we go, so everyone can see me. I apologize. But like I was saying, today we're going to cover how to leverage KNIME's data apps to broaden the reach of data science in your organization. I'm Alex Quintana. I oversee your partnerships in the Americas, and I'm joined by Wally Khan, who manages our customer care team in the Americas. Hi, Wally. So Wally and I spent a lot of time with our partners and customers, helping them productionize their data and developing data apps. So we wanted to spend time with you today showing you how you can leverage data apps to deliver actionable insights to your end users whenever they need it without having to constantly rely on you. We encourage you to use the Q&A option here on the Zoom. We'll have 15 minutes at the end to go over any questions and answer as many of the questions as we possibly can. Also, throughout the presentation, think about what data app you would like to build and to perhaps tackle some of the requests that you're most often receiving from your end users. If you come up with any idea that you like for us to take a look at and you like to create a data app, Wally's team is going to make themselves available to you to get your data app up and running. So email Wally. I have our emails here. Email Wally your idea and we'll get you some resources to get your data app functioning. All right, so next slide here. Let's see. So I know a lot of you folks that are joining us today are quite familiar with KNIME, but for the new folks that are joining us today, I'll give you a quick rundown of KNIME and some of the features and functionalities that might be interesting to you. Essentially, with KNIME, the entire life cycle of your data analytics and science process and data science processes, from ETL to deploying models can be done in a single enterprise-ready, low-code, no-code platform. So if you're looking to tailor your workflows with code, you can definitely do that, of course. We offer a complete range of advanced data analytics techniques, but perhaps if you're not as familiar with advanced data science, our platform is still a great tool for you. The visual programming and the drag and drop elements of KNIME make it very easy and intuitive for everyone to, even if you don't have a strong advanced data analytics background, to ramp up quickly and start creating workflows to productionize your data. Lastly, and this is one of my favorite things about KNIME, we have a thriving and dynamic open source community backing us. At KNIME, we are propelled by community-driven innovation. We have thousands of contributors innovating and solving issues. So this gives you the opportunity to be able to move quickly and adapt fast to the ever-changing world of advanced data analytics. We are usually, months, if not years ahead of what some of our, what the market is seeing, because we are propelled by this community that is constantly coming up with ideas and solutions. Again, one of my favorite things about KNIME. So our goal here at KNIME is, and I should probably change the slide here. There we go. One of our goals here at KNIME is to enable teams to make sense of data. We're passionate about data, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible can get their hands on this data, access it in a straightforward and digestible way. When Wally and I are in conversations with customers, we find that oftentimes their teams promote data science internally in one of two ways. Either they are upscaling their business and domain experts, or they're building a centralized data team that is focused on delivering data insights to the business and domain experts. Generally, the approach that your organization and your team leverages really depends on your use cases and obviously your team structure. And while KNIME can help with both of these approaches, today specifically, we're going to be focusing on how data teams can leverage data apps to hand business experts and end users this data applications, and they don't have to be relying so heavily on this data team. Next slide. There we go. I want to make sure that, yep, the slide seems to be working correctly. So decentralized data teams often spend a lot of time responding to requests by the end users. This is something that we constantly hear. If I had a penny for each time that I connect with a data team and they're like, you know what, we would really like to be doing really cool things, but instead we have to tackle 10 requests a day. So generally what ends up happening is that the data teams get frustrated because they'll like to use their time to innovate, but instead they're constantly putting out fires and responding to this request by the end users. And of course, in turn, the end users are also frustrated because they can't get their reports fast enough. There's a lot of back and forth in the tweaking of the reports. So Data Apps removes this layer of inaccessibility for the end users and gives them the ability to execute workflows of any complexity without having to interact with the underlying workflow that your data team has built. So all the complications, all the cool data science and drag and drop and the building of the workflow that your team creates, your end users don't have to worry about that. It's very straightforward to them. So now you have your end users not relying on you constantly, not having to be bugging you constantly to get their hands on the data they need, and effectively removing the bottleneck that the data teams inevitably creates. So now your data team creates the workflow once, deploys it to Data Apps, and frees up a lot of time to focus on actually innovating and moving the business forward instead of, again, putting fires all day. Who would like that? I know that, definitely something that sticks with our customers and our partners and a lot of the folks that are in data teams, especially when we tell them, hey, you can create a workflow once, deploy it, and your end users are going to be, running it by themselves. It's definitely a big sticking point for them. So Wally will go into more details on his demo on how to build data apps. But before we jump into that, and especially for the new folks that are joining us today that perhaps are not as familiar with Nime, I wanted to emphasize that Data Apps is part of the Nime platform. Like I mentioned in my first slide, Nime is a complete data analytics platform. You can read in data from all different sources, integrated with other tech, connect to data warehouses like Snowflake or Databricks, and use the nodes and visual programming to create workflows that productionize your data. And there we go. So essentially, and let me make sure, yep, the slide's showing. So again, Data Apps is intended to facilitate the deployment of your pre-configured workflows. So on your end, you run it. So once you have pre-configured these workflows, your end users can run it themselves and access the data insights in a digestible and efficient manner without having to constantly depend on you. So when you're ready to ship the workflow, you can build the data app using the same visual and intuitive environment that you're already familiar with. You see when Wally demos this part, but essentially you drag and drop the nodes onto the page to create the data app, specify the permissions, and share the data app so your end users can access it. It truly is that easy. Obviously, there's a lot of data science magic and cool stuff that happens for the data teams, but generally it's a very useful and efficient way to get your end users' hands on the data. Speaking of Wally showing you a demo, he's got 3 examples of how data apps can help your team configure and tailor applications to reduce the time and effort you spend tackling this ongoing request. The first example will cover how to use data apps to build applications that predict maintenance and evaluate machine condition. It's very cool and extremely useful, especially in manufacturing settings. The second example is going to use linear regression to allow analysts to evaluate the factors that impact housing costs. And the last example, and this is my favorite example because obviously, a lot of us here at Avid social media users, the last example will cover how to create a data app to have your marketers and analysts, execute workflows to uncover the sentiments of tweets for a brand or perhaps a campaign. Again, this is my favorite. When I saw this, I said, I want this on my day-to-day life. This would be extremely useful. So, all right, without further ado, over to you, Wally. Show us how to build some cool data apps.
Cool, thanks, Alex. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. So what you're all seeing right now is a data app. In this case, for machine monitoring, it's that first example that Alex was talking about. And this is just a really simple example of something that can be configured, really a dashboard. So in this scenario, you work on a factory floor, you do data analysis for a factory floor, and machines need to be monitored for uptime and downtime. So if something goes wrong with the machine on your factory floor, it means that, your business is losing money, which is not good. Before data apps, you might have been kind of constantly bothered to run a report or to check on these machines manually. Here, you can configure an application to automatically gather the appropriate data and see the status of each machine. You'll be able to see the scatter plot right here, which shows you the status of each machine relative to its last maintenance day, as well as the day that it was installed, so how old it is. Green means that it's good, it's up and running. Red means that it's bad and that it's stopped. And then yellow means it's stopped, but it usually is in an okay state. Probably it's down for maintenance. You took it offline on purpose. The point of this is that it's easy for you to do and that it's intuitive for the end users, right? They can come in here and you can really easily see green is good, yellow is okay, red is bad. Now, you can also configure this interface to the desired capabilities of your end user. So rather than just giving them a static plot, you can do things like filter on the data. So in this case, you can filter down to when the machine was installed. So say something in the last 5 years, the last time that it was maintained, as well as this little checkbox to see what type of machine that you want to actually look at. Right now, we're looking at just the drilling machines, but maybe you're interested in looking at the grinding and planing machines instead. And then finally, you want to look at what's just stopped. With the click of a button, you're able to filter down and get to the data that you want without having to actually mess with any backend applications or databases or nothing like that. So again, the point of this one is really that it's just a super simple example of a dashboard that you could build, let you filter some data, get some data visualizations, and make whatever insights that you need to as a business user, and then provide those next steps to the business in remediating whatever issues they might have. So first example in the books, let's take a look at our second example, which is one step up. All right. So our next example is the linear regression builder to predict home prices. I clicked run and then it loads the workflow and loads the application. And you might be able to kind of intuitively see that this is a little bit more than a dashboard. Here, your problem might be more along the lines of constantly needing to build or update a model that predicts home price. I mean, it could be anything in your scenario, right? It could be credit scores, or it could be emissions. It could be even predictive maintenance, continuing on from our last example. As things are constantly changing, your models need to get updated, and the variables that are meaningful to your model right now might change over time. And as data scientists, data analysts, like Alex was saying, you're probably familiar with analysts that keep bugging you for the latest model, or maybe your model's drifted a little bit and you need to spend a lot of time doing those updates, as well as keeping the business happy. So what you could be doing instead is more of a self-service fashion, freeing up your time and theirs. In this example, you'll be able to let your analyst come in, run this application, and select the target variable. So in this case, we're going to leave it as median home value, but you could, your analyst could pick whatever variable they want to and what they want to predict. And as you start to add and remove variables for what variables are influencing this model, you can kind of see that this model changes in real time, or this application changes in real time in the background. So I added residential land. So how big is this house? Maybe we want to look at, or your analyst wants to look at, if this is a riverside property and say the average number of rooms. And every time they add this, you can see that the model updates in the background. Small data set, that's why the training is happening quickly, but you get the idea. Good. Your analyst will be able to see the number of observed values versus the predicted values, and maybe this looks a little linear to you. Your analyst will also be able to come in here, or you, if you're the analyst, will be able to say, okay, which variable influences the home value the most? In this case, it's the average number of rooms. Intuitively, that makes sense to people, maybe who are looking for a house, the more rooms it has, usually the more valuable it is. And then the point of this application, as kind of cool as it is, if you ask me, and you can do whatever type of modeling you want. This is just an example for linear regression. You can do things like AutoML and have to train a bunch of different models. Quite a few examples on that, actually. The point of this is that it takes the workload off of you, and then it gives your analyst a self-service place to do whatever they need to do. And with the self-service model, you want to make sure that it's safe and you provide guidance and guardrails along the way. As an analyst, how do I know that this is a good model? If I'm not a data scientist, how do I measure these things? And one of the things that you can do as someone who's configuring and tailoring these applications to your audience, who their capabilities, what's appropriate for them, as well as what they need, you can give them hints and guidance along the way. So in this case, on the right-hand side, you'll see this little model quality indicator in this little box saying, hey, this model has an R-squared value of 0.403. It's of decent accuracy. As an analyst, I don't know what linear regression is, and I don't know what an R-squared value is. But you, as the person who's configured this application, are telling me that this is a decently accurate model, and maybe I want a really, really well-performing model. So I could come back into this application and continue to fine-tune it as needed. So you could go ahead and add things like, if it's older than 1940, maybe this pupil to teacher ratio. So if there's a good school district or something like that. And then eventually your analyst will be able to come in here and say, hey, this model is accurate, or you're telling me that it's accurate. And then I can trust this model and continue on with my day. I don't have to come bother you. I can just download this and run with it as I need to. So this is really a simple way for you to abstract away the complexities of data science to those who need to consume its outputs, right? Good. All right, let's go take a look at our third example. We'll start with how it looks like at the end, and then we'll see how we can take something that's existing and actually build and deploy a data app. All right, so this time when you click run, your first page is actually going to be just inputs. And in this scenario, your marketing team is always bothering you to figure out how well the brand is being received. Maybe there's some incident that happened in your marketing world or across your brand, and they need to do some remediation. They don't know where to focus, or just generally, they always want to know how well the brand is doing across the sentiment of the general population. So on this, you're actually able to have many pages on a data app. So these pages could be configured to do anything a workflow can do. So assuming you know how Nime AP and how workflows work, you're able to do whatever a workflow does, but also provide some guidance to your end user. Personally, I like to think of data apps as kind of data as a process. In the past two examples, we just saw single page screens, right? Fully encompassing, get your inputs and your outputs along the way. But if you have maybe a more complex process and you can break it down into logical segments with inputs and outputs, that's where that data process really starts to make sense. Your users can provide some input, they'll get an output, and then you're able to take that output and either provide more inputs or get some insights along the way. And then you can repeat that process however many times you need to. So here you want your marketing team or your users to be able to grab the sentiment for the tweets of a specific Twitter handle. So you prompt them to type in the Twitter handle over here, and then the number of tweets that you want to receive. You could just as easily done this across whatever example you can think of, where it's Instagram handles, or it's maybe type in the database to get some data from, or run a SQL query, or even, I don't know, all sorts of things. But the point is, inputs can be provided across all sorts of different things so that it can tailor the outputs that they need. All right, so we'll leave this as American Airlines, and we'll leave this as 25 tweets. When your user clicks next, the workflow begins to process in the background. And it's the complexities of sentiment analysis, data wrangling are all abstracted away from them. So your marketing team is going to be able to quickly see the number of negative, neutral, and positively classified tweets across the last 25 that they grabbed. They're also going to be able to look at this word cloud, for example. So let's maximize this. And you can see that people are talking about a trip, which makes sense because it's an airline. For those of you who aren't familiar with the word cloud, it takes all of the words, adds them together. The bigger the word, the more that it's being talked about. So across the last 25 tweets, people are talking about luggage, delays, maintenance, and these are the things that the marketing team could focus on, right? So whatever's being talked about right now. Good. They could also come in here and you could see the actual tweets themselves, if they're neutral, if they're negatively classified, quickly just by the image as well. Yellow meaning neutral, green meaning bad, or sorry, red meaning bad. Let's see, we have a positive one. This guy loves the new app update. And now they know who to focus on as well. So you can imagine you come in here, you run this, you can see right now we're overwhelmingly negative or neutral, not a whole lot of positives. How do you reconcile this across the people that are interacting with your brand? Well, your marketing team can quickly go in there and say, hey, let's focus on helping out the people that have a negative opinion of us, or let's take the people who have a positive opinion of us and make them even happier, make them more loyal customers. Good. All right, so now let's jump into some of the meat of this. We're going to go over to the analytics platform to see how this actually gets built. All right, let's assume you've already built this great workflow, which grabs tweets from American Airlines and then assigns a sentiment and creates an Excel sheet for your users. So you can see that it's connecting to Twitter. Let me zoom in a little bit here. You're connecting to Twitter with the Twitter node, right? You're searching for American Airlines with the Twitter search node. And then ultimately, if we scroll all the way to this side, you're doing a bunch of data pre-processing, and then you have your models, they're already built. You think they're good models. You apply those models, and then coming out of this group by, you'll be able to see the tweets as well as if they're negative, neutral, or positive. And then coming out of this column rename, you'll be able to see how many are negative tweets, neutral tweets, and then positive tweets. And we don't have to focus on the text processing or anything right here, but you got a good workflow. It works well for the business. It gives them what they need. But right now, you're just writing those two outputs into Excel. And so there's a gap there, right? How do you go from something online to Excel, then back to online if they have to do something with it? Maybe you're sending this out kind of in a static report or on an automated basis, but it still is, there's a bottleneck somewhere, whether that's you or whether that's with the business and how efficiently they can do this. So how can you take this and create a meaningful self-service application like we just saw? Well, for those of you who already know Nime, which I'm assuming is just about all of you, it's still going to be easy, right? You're still going to be using nodes. So if I open this up a little bit, you can come to this workflow abstraction section, and there's this whole section for widgets. And you can see there's input, selection, filter, output, and re-execution. What this really means, if we dig into any of these, is these are visualizations for you to give your users inputs, outputs, decision-making skills along this workflow. So you, as the person who's configuring this workflow, can still give them guidance and places to give input. All right, so we just saw it in the web view, but let's go ahead and let our users search for their own Twitter handle, and then we want them to be able to get some n number of tweets. And if you go to the widget section, we want them to be able to provide text, right? So you give them a string widget, and then we want them to be able to provide a number or an integer. I'll connect these two guys really quickly, but let's go look at this configuration. You configure this just like you would any normal node, right? So the only thing to be mindful of as you're going through this now is that, usually when you build workflows, you might build them for yourself, but you're now building it for someone else. So these labels become extremely important because that's what's going to show on the UI. So on this string widget, you can give it a label of enter your Twitter query. I'll make this variable for those of you that are familiar with flow variables called Twitter query. And then you can give it some default value. You can validate this along the way. So even more room for guidance and guardrails for the end users so that when you're configuring your tailored applications, it runs smoothly. And I'll just make this to American Air and hit OK. And you can right click and execute and open this view to get a preview of what this single node looks like. So this is what this node will show as on the UI. All right, let's do the same thing for our integer. We'll call it number of tweets. We'll say something like enter the number of tweets you want to pull. And we'll call this variable num tweets. And I'll leave it as a default of 25 and hit OK. We'll bring this over to our Twitter search. Let's take a look and let's open this integer widget too, just to see what it looks like. So number of tweets, good. So I have these two individual inputs. We want to pass them onto our Twitter search. The way you can do that is by going to the Flow Variables tab. You'll be able to select the variable you want to use. So for the query, I'll use the Twitter query. And then for the rows, you'll grab the number of tweets. And okay, good. Now what, right? You have these two visualizations. They're both acting independently. How do you make them into a page on the web portal? The way it works is you use components. So each component with visualizations ends up becoming one page on a data app. So I'll create this component right here. I'll just select these nodes and hit component. Let's reset this, that's okay. We'll call this component our Twitter query and hit OK. So just like that, took all those nodes, turned them into a component. And this has visualizations inside of it. This component does not. So this one won't show. Twitter keys will not show. Twitter query will show. Each component with visualizations ends up becoming one page on the data. And you can right click and execute and open the views on Twitter query. Oh, forgot to do one thing. When you create a component, you have to pass in the flow variables. Good. Now, when I execute and open this, you'll be able to see that this ends up becoming one page, or it looks just like that page we saw over here, right? Different headers, but you get the idea. Now, you can also give your users more guidance along the way. You can pretty this up with visualizations, text inputs and outputs. So I'll add one more thing called a text output widget. And this will give our users some title. So I don't want to label here, but you can give whatever HTML output that you would like. So I'll create a header and say, enter your Twitter search here. All right, so I added another output, right? Or another blue node, which is a widget. And all of our blue nodes are visualizations. Yellow are data manipulators, orange are connectors, but blue means visualization. And so if I go and execute and open this view now, you'll be able to see that I added this title, right? And this doesn't look good. So how do you actually configure this page to now look good? And what you're able to do is come in here, click these three white rectangles, and you get another visual-based editor for configuring your layout. This works on a kind of row and column-based setup. So I'll actually clear this layout, and you can now drag these nodes over as you need to define the layout of that page. So you can add a text output to the top, right? That's our title. And maybe in this scenario, just to show you kind of how it works, you can add some number of columns. So I actually want my string and my integer to be next to each other in this scenario. All right. Now, when you open this view, you'll be able to see that it looks formatted a little bit cleaner, right? Your users can come in here. Your first page will say, enter your Twitter search. Here's your query. Here's a number of tweets. Good. The second step in this has some visualizations. And so the other set of nodes that is super useful are going to be in views and then JavaScript. So you can see that there's bar charts, there's box plots, heat maps, histograms, tables, pie charts, line plots, all sorts of visualizations that you need or would want to use. And then you can even just type in some JavaScript and make your own if you really want to. All right, so if we go to the very right of this, we don't want our users to work with Excel anymore. We want that to be dynamic, right? Just so that everyone's aware, you can download files at the end of these data apps or anywhere along the way. But in this scenario, we're just going to have our folks have that bar chart, be able to look at the tweets themselves, and we want them to be able to quickly see what people are talking about in the form of that word cloud. So let's run this. And the first thing we'll do is actually, we'll grab the easiest thing, if you ask me, is just display the table, right? Display the tweets. You can do that with what's called the table view node. Come in here and you can configure this like you normally would. You can give it some title, saying tweets. Don't want to display things like row keys, and you can pick what you want to display to your users. So I don't care about the source. I don't care about the date. I just care about the prediction and some of these other things. And then with all of the nodes that are blue, you can execute and open those views to get a sense of what's happening. So this is what it looks like right now, but you want to make this even easier for your end users by giving them a color code, right? Red meaning bad, yellow meaning okay, and then green meaning good. And you can do that, so you can classify or color whatever data you have within KNIME with something like the color manager. And so you can pop this in between, and we'll say, which column do you want to color? And we'll look at the prediction. So negative is green right now. I want to change that to be red. Neutral, you can make it yellow. That's an ugly yellow. Let's make it orange. And then positive, you can make it this green. And so now when you open this table view, you can see that the yellows are yellow, the reds are red, or the negatives are red, and the neutrals are yellow, and the greens are positive. Good. Let's add a couple more visualizations. We want to add a bar chart to get a grouping of all of our total number of tweets and their sentiment. So date, that's okay. I want the sum of negative, neutral, and positive tweets. And if you execute and open this view, you can see you get the sum of negative, neutral, and positive tweets. But again, you want to make this easy for your end users. And the coloring on this doesn't really match up what most people think of negative, neutral, and positive. And so even with this bar chart, you can assign colors. And it's not too difficult. What you do is you have to split out what column gets what color. You can do that with by extracting the column headers and then transposing this. So just to show everyone what this looks like, you have 3 columns right now, negative, neutral, and positive. We're going to split this into being 1 column with 3 different rows, or 4 different rows. And now you can do the same thing you just did with the table view and apply a color manager. Okay. And we want negative to be, we'll make date black. We could have removed this, but we'll make negative red, neutral green, and then positive, sorry, neutral needs to be orange. Positive will make green. We pop this guy into here. And now when you look at this view, you'll see that you have red, yellow, and. All right. Last visualization to add is going to be the tag cloud, which is your word cloud. And you just want this to come from here. So get a title. We'll call it what people are talking about. We'll just make this 150 values. And then you want the terms that are being used here. And now when you execute and open this, you'll see it's that word cloud. So within 4 or 5 minutes, you're able to add all those visualizations. And then if you want to turn this into a page on that data app, you're able to take all the nodes that you want, create a component. We'll call this our visualizations. When you go into this component, you can run everything. Let's actually add another title in the form of our text output. And we'll call this do something with these tweets. All right, cool. Now we just have to do the same thing we did on the first page, which is make sure that it's formatted all well. So clear this layout. I always put the title on the top. We'll grab one of these row column splitters. We'll put the bar chart to the left, the tag cloud to the right, and we'll put the table view on the very bottom over here. And just like that, you should have your second screen. So do something with these tweets, what people are talking about, and then each tweet in itself. So that's how you build it. And if I zoom out a little bit, this is something that I always kind of pre-answer, but there's 2 pages, right? You have this first page, which is going to be the Twitter query search, and then the second page, which is your visualizations. And Nime's kind of smart enough to know that this is going to go as a workflow from left to right, and that this page, because it's on the left-hand side, will come first, and because this is on the right-hand side, it'll go second. And to start having your end users consume this, all you have to do is deploy this to a Nime server. So let me do that really quickly, but you just have to find your workflow, save it, and then you will be able to upload it to the Nime server or hub under your name. And once this goes through, you can see it's uploading. Come back over to the web portal where your data apps are stored. This is the brand new application that you just deployed. You click run, and it's just like you configured. So here's that first page. You just configured it, gave your user some guidance on what to type in. And then you get your second page, which is their outputs. So pretty easy, hopefully intuitive. Showed you 3 examples, right? One was a dashboard with the machine monitoring. Second one was actually building models. And then this third one is doing something with models. And the point of this is really to show you that these applications are just kind of workflows in the backend. So anything you can do with the workflow, you can surface on this, this browser. Your end users don't have to download anything. They can just come in here, click run, type in what they need to, and get what they need to out. Tailored to whatever you need it to be and whatever your business and end users need it to be as well. Good. That's all I had to show you. So I think we have, what, 18 or so minutes left. I guess we'll jump over to the Q&A, unless, Alex, you have something else you want to add.
No, I think that we got quite a bit of questions to tackle here in the Q&A, so that's perfect. That gives us enough time to make sure that we get as many questions answered as possible. Thank you, Wally. I gotta say, my favorite thing, as I was saying in the demo, my favorite thing about data apps, and there's quite a bit, is the color coordination. I'm a very visual person, and having that ability to see red, orange, or green, to me especially, is a game changer.
Yeah, and I mean, you can do that across everything, right? Red, orange, and green, super easy example. And I like showing that one, but it makes sense, right? Negative, bad, green, good. Do something about it, right?
Definitely. So, Wally, I don't know if you can see the Q&A here, but I can read some of the questions that we have gotten, and perhaps we can take the next 10 to 15 minutes to tackle some of these questions.
Sure. Cool.
All right. So, does the Nime website contain any files for data, any files for example data apps that we can play with?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes. I think there's a whole data apps landing page, as well as we'll make all of these applications available as well. So quite a few. There's a whole bunch on the hub. Most of these I actually didn't build most of these myself, or I tweaked them a little bit, but they are all examples that we have.
Yep. And we've been sharing some of the links here that you guys can go look on our website. But before the end of the webinar and as follow-up, we'll share links where you can access the data apps landing page on our website as well. Another good question that we got is, does Nime, can the user download, for example, Excel list with analysis results from the data apps?
Yeah, definitely. You can upload and download files. So just really quickly, answer is yes. There are, in the output section, there's a file download widget. So whatever file, I guess I should zoom in on that. There's a file download widget. There's also a file upload widget as well.
Okay. Perfect. So, Wally, a big question, repeated question actually that we've gotten, and the team and I have tried to answer it a bit while you were demoing, but the repeated question is, how does Data Apps compare to a Power BI or other BI tools as a standalone solution? If you can touch a little bit on that kind of comparison and what differentiates Data Apps.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I get quite a bit. They can work in tandem. One, they're not necessarily competitors. Sometimes they're cohesive. So Tableau, Power BI, great tools. They're dashboarding visualization tools as well. But they're limited in what they can do on the back end. Where KNIME Data Apps come into play for me personally is, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, I think of them as data as a process. So maybe not the best examples to pick for that type of thinking, but whatever your process is in the data, KNIME conforms to it. So whereas in Tableau and Power BI, you're only consuming things that have been done, you as an end user within this data app can provide inputs along the way and conform to some logical data process. So you can train a model, see the outputs of that model, and then do something with that model all within one workflow or within one data application. Whereas within Tableau and Power BI, you would only see the consumption of that model at the end of the day. So hopefully that makes sense. I always think of it data as a process, whatever you're doing, whatever you need to do. It could be a multi-step process or a single-step process. KNIME will help you through that process. If you need a dashboard or some visualizations, Tableau and Power BI are also great tools.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, it's something that we get on a daily basis. So if any of you have any questions or would like to further explore, data apps specifically compared to a Power BI or other BI tools, let us know. Reach out, and we're happy to have that conversation one-on-one, specific to your particular use case, of course. Another good question, Wally, is if you click on the red in the bar chart, does it filter table, word cloud, etc. accordingly?
It can. It's just like a couple more clicks to make that work. But by default, it's not configured to do that. They're really easy to do. Each of these things have an interactivity option, and you can define what that interactivity lets your users do.
Perfect. We got some other questions here. If a lot of people in the company should use a workflow on the server, what is the best way to give them access to the server?
The best way to give them access to the server. So the Nime server comes with a whole set of permissionings. And this is the best way. There's no right answer. It's which way do you need it to work in, if that makes sense. You can do things like permissioning. You can do things like embedding this web portal or this data app into another application if you need it to be. You can give them a link to use this one application only, all sorts of things. It's more, this is maybe one of the scenarios where you want to reach out because it's going to conform to whatever your process needs to do rather than telling you how to do the process itself.
Exactly. One more question here, and then maybe we can do one last look to see if there's any outstanding questions. But Jeffrey asks, can the resulted web page be exported for use outside of Nime Server, like in a PDF, for example?
Yeah, you could grab it. One of the things that I see happen more often is you can just embed this, and I think maybe that's where that question is coming from. But you can embed this as an iframe in another application, so they could use that where they need to.
Okay, perfect. And thank you, Wally. And I think that Christian here reminded everyone, I hope that you guys got some cool ideas of data apps that you can create, especially data apps that would bring value to your team and save you time and effort. So if you got any ideas, please remember to email Wally and I any questions that you have, and we'll be happy to connect, perhaps book a session, and ensure that you have the resources necessary to get those data apps up and running. Wally, I don't know if you want to go through the questions really quick and see if there's any other question that stands out to you that we want to be sure to tackle here live.
Yeah, let me pull it up. So okay.
One question is, go ahead.
I was going to say, can you select only? Oh, you just wanted to see how average room. We'll share this workflow, and you could try it out to see how those values change. So we can send you these as well, workflows. I think they'll be attached. And then I think there's some questions on training and developing this. Both Alex and I are here to help everyone if they have questions, but there is a course, I think, that's called the L3 Productionizing Data Apps that everyone's able to go and check out. It's all about building data apps. So there is training available for just data applications, as well as a whole bunch of stuff if you want to do data science or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great course. It's self-paced. You can go ahead and kind of do it on your own terms, and it'll get you set up. And of course, we're all here as a resource in our community. Like I mentioned earlier, NIME has a thriving open source community. We have the forums, and if you have any questions, any concerns, be sure to participate in those forums, and we'll be sure that you get yourself an answer there. Last question that I want to tackle before we move here to the last point is that we had a question about whether in order to build data apps, you need a server. And the answer is yes. Data apps is available through or server medium or server large. However, the process of building the data app is through our Nime analytics platform, which a lot of folks here are familiarized with. It's just when you deploy that data app to be consumed by your end users, you do need a server in that case. I hope that that's sufficiently clear, but again, any questions, please let us know.
Yeah, and just I think back to the course, all of the courses are going to be happening at the NIME Summit that's happening November 14th as well.
Yeah, which is a great segue, Wally, here to the last slide I wanted to share with everyone here today. You are all cordially invited to the NIME Summit in Austin in November. It's going to be a great time, not only because the NIME community is going to be rallying there. We're all very excited. It's the first in-person summit that we have since the pandemic. So it's a very exciting time for us. And not only there's that aspect, but also hopefully we bring a lot of value to you and your teams. We're going to be holding trainings. Obviously, you hear from our partners and customers on what they're doing with NIME and how they're breaking barriers with NIME, which is always very inspiring. And also we'll have workshops, so you can actually sit down and get your hands dirty with NIME and start creating awesome workflows. We'll have an Excel to NIME workshop. We'll also have a Python workshop with NIME. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wally, but very exciting stuff happening in the summit. And if you decide to join us, please use the join us 10 code for a 10% discount on your ticket. Wally, you've been to quite a bit of NIME summits. Any insights, anything that you love about being in the summits?
Well, I think the most kind of refreshing thing about this summit is that it's a little unique in that there's an open source community, there's an academic community, and then there's a business and enterprise community. So it's actually pretty refreshing getting to just see all those different perspectives. It's very genuine in that sense, where you all get to meet each other and then actually collaborate across not only different industries, but different disciplines, and then work with community to see what people really want. You can work with academics to see really what's happening in the future, and then even some of the business stuff to see maybe what's happening now and such.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to one of my partners last week, and they said that they always come out of this summits and this events wanting to do more with Nime and very inspired with what their peers are doing. So it's definitely a great opportunity to, kind of get a little bit of insights from each of the industries that are there and see how you can incorporate it to your own day-to-day.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's it for us, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Please do email and reach out to us with any of your data apps ideas. We're very excited to see what you come up with. And we hope that we see you all in Austin in November.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Paolo.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.